everyone, Kelly here. And so a couple months ago, I did a vlog where I read a bunch of new releases and talked about them. And unfortunately, all of them I really didn't like. I gave them all like 2, maybe 3 stars. And I was really disappointed about that. But since then, I have read some really great new releases. And I just wanted to dedicate a recent reads just to those like new releases that I gave 4 and 5 stars to give you some recommendations of newer books. These are all books that came out in 2020 and I really loved all of them. And there's a few different genres and age categories. So let's just talk about them. My kids are probably running around someplace in the back. This is the only way I can film anymore. It's just do it while they're playing. And so you might hear them running around and stuff, but this is the way to get my filming still done and get these reviews out. The first book I want to talk to you about is a thriller called Little Secrets by Jennifer Hillier. And this is a child abduction story, but I feel like it's a little different, for me at least, than some of the others I have read because we're not following a detective or anything. We're just following the mother of this little boy. So the very first beginning, I don't know if it's the first chapter or the like prologue, is the abduction where Maren is the main character and her little boy Sebastian is abducted. And that chapter was just like really heart punch because, you know, we get to like really feel the terror of being a parent who has lost their child in a crowded area and doesn't know whether he's just lost or taken or whatever. And then we skip to the next chapter or the first chapter or whatever. And it is a whole year later and her son is still not found. And so the police have basically run cold in the investigation, so they're not really actively looking for him anymore. And we're following her and kind of, you know, her marriage of they're not really talking to each other anymore. They're together, but that has fallen apart. She's part of a support group for other parents who have missing children, and we're following kind of that process, you know, all of her survival guilt and just like everything that's happening in her life a year later. And she finally decides to hire a private investigator to continue the search for her son since the police have basically given up. And so we're kind of following the, you know, we're not following the private investigator, but we're learning about what the private investigator is finding out about the case. But mainly we're just following Maren and her feelings and the things that are happening in her life a year after her child is gone. And I just thought that that was a really great way to see the like situation and to follow an abduction case, to really see what that like survivor guilt feels like and all that. And as a parent, like I don't think I've ever cried during a thriller because thrillers don't really pull that emotion from me. Like I might have been like a little scared or like apprehensive or uncomfortable or whatever, but never like downright cry. And I cried several times in this book, and it was all around the support group. Like I just thought those scenes in the book were really like full of emotion, and you know, we're hearing the stories of all the people in the group and what they're going through, whether they've given up hope, whether they are still like years later thinking their child is out there, and all that. And I just thought it was a really well done, like a more unique way to approach a child abduction story. I enjoyed the ending and everything. Like, I don't think it was a complete surprise, but I also thought it was just well done and evenly paced throughout the book. I wouldn't call this like an action-packed thriller or anything. I think it definitely is dealing with the emotions of being a parent who is just like doing everything they can to continue the search for their child and kind of pulling together what life they have left. And so I would definitely highly recommend that one. And the next book is also a thriller called The Guest List by Lucy Foley. And I don't know if I said this, but I'm starting with my 4 stars. So these 2 thrillers were both 4 stars. They weren't perfect, but they were highly entertaining and good. And this one, it takes place on a kind of like island off of the coast of Ireland. Yes. And it's basically uninhabited. It just has this like manor where people can have events or kind of like stay the night or whatever, and they have a wedding happening there. And so the wedding guests are the only people on this island. Somebody turns up dead the night of the wedding, and the great thing about this book is we don't know who the dead person is, like for most of the book. So there's that whole mystery of who the dead body is, and we're kind of playing with timelines, going back and forth. And so that really holds my interest in not knowing who it is who has died, so we don't know necessarily what the motives would be for their death. And we're following several different perspectives. We have like the bride, the plus one, the best man, the wedding planner, the bridesmaid, and then we're following the body. So all these different perspectives was really interesting to me. You know, they switched enough. I didn't feel like it was confusing the amount of times it switched. Like each one had a distinct like sound to their voice. But it switched enough to keep it interesting, so we could kind of see what was happening on different parts of the island and from different perspectives, and see, like, I kind of felt like anybody could have been the murderer the whole time. And I really enjoy that when it kind of could be like where it doesn't feel like there's one specific person that is like, oh yeah, that's definitely the killer right there. I did think that a lot of the stuff that happened was predictable. Like, I pretty much guessed every single thing that happens, but like I was entertained throughout the whole way. So even though it wasn't a surprise to me, I found that like each one of the things that happened, like kind of reveal, was interesting and was well like presented in the right time in the story. It was well paced. I enjoyed hearing from all those different characters and the way they interacted with each other, and the secrets and the lies and the things that were happening between the guests and the like people working the wedding and all that. And I just thought it kept me interested the entire time, and I would highly recommend this one. Like I said, it's not perfect because I think it is pretty predictable, so it wasn't necessarily 5 stars for me. But if a book can still keep me entertained and invested even when I guessed everything that happens, I find that to be entertaining and worthwhile read. And now we're switching gears with the last 4-star book to a YA contemporary, and it is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. And this book is written in verse, and I highly recommend listening to the audiobook because it has 2 different narrators, and one of the narrators is Elizabeth Acevedo, and I think she's just a great narrator. And so I enjoyed hearing it read out loud by 2 different narrators and hearing the 2 girls' voices. And so this is a book about 2 teenagers. One, Camino, lives in the Dominican Republic, and Yahara lives in New York City. And both of them, at the very beginning, we find out that their father was on a plane that crashed. And this was a real plane crash that happened. And it happened so close to 9/11 that it didn't get a lot of press. And so it was really great. I think it's really great that Elizabeth Acevedo is bringing to light that all these people, a lot of them were connected to the Dominican Republic, went through this, crisis as a country, hearing about this plane crash and all the people that died, and it just didn't get really the world recognition because it happened so close to 9/11. And so both of them, their father died on this plane, and then they find out that they're actually sisters, and it was the same father that died, and they didn't know about each other their whole lives. And so we're kind of like following each of their lives and their relationship with their father, but then also what happens as they start to learn about each other and want to meet and things like that. It's a very quick book because it's written in verse, but I think it packs a lot of emotions and a lot of things happening. Some excellent portrayals of grief. I just thought the whole book was very interesting. I didn't give it 5 stars just because I thought it should have probably brought them together sooner, because I thought that the first half of the book was a little slow moving, and I think that if they had gotten together earlier, I would have liked to have seen that relationship building more and less focused on the build up to them knowing about each other, if you know what I mean. But still thought it was excellent, and the audiobook is really good. And now into my 2 5-star books I want to talk about. And I absolutely loved both of these books, and yet they're like polar opposites. So let's talk about the more lighthearted adult books. So I read Beach Read by Emily Henry, which is an adult romance contemporary book. This is romance in the fact that it's not overly steamy, would have a couple sex scenes in it. So if you're somebody that wants, a relationship but doesn't necessarily want the whole focus of the book to be on sex, this is a great book. I love it. This is the perfect amount of steaminess for me, that the focus of the book isn't on the relationship, but the relationship is a big part of the story. And I just loved this book. I loved the characters, their relationship with each other, but then also the things they were going through in their everyday life. This centers around, sorry, my kids are making spitty noises. I apologize. So anyways, this follows a woman named January who is a writer, and she's going through some writer's block, and just recently her father passed away and left her this beach house. And if you look at this book in the cover, you think this is going to be kind of like a summery southern like United States beach read, but no, this is like Michigan lake, so this is not like ocean beach. So don't come into this think this is like a lot of time spent out on the beach. Like, it's cold. So I'm not sure exactly why it's called beach read, but yeah, so she inherits this beach house on Lake Michigan, and she goes to stay there to get it ready to sell. And while she's there, she thinks she'll be able to like write her next book so that she can get, you know, get money, because she's just needs more money. She needs money, like she hasn't written in a while and needs that next source of income. And so this will give her like the focus to do this. But then she finds out her neighbor is a man that she went to college with named Gus. And when they were in college, they were in like writers groups together and writing classes together, and they didn't really get along because he writes literary fiction and kind of like higher literary books, and she writes romance. And so like she always thought he was judging her for what she wrote. And so it's about them like kind of getting to know each other again, her dealing with the grief of her father, and also finding out that her father wasn't exactly who she thought he was. Like, they were always really close, but then found out her father was lying about a lot of things. So she's going through all of that. So there's a lot about her grief. Gus is also coming out of some stuff. I don't really want to go into what Gus is going through, because I feel like we don't get that at the beginning of the story, and we're not following his perspective. So we're learning that throughout, but he has some definite issues that he is dealing with as well. So they're both dealing with these issues, but then also kind of learning to support each other through them. And I just loved the relationship. I loved the kind of slower build of it. I loved kind of the way the hate to love was done, that the hate came from like having all this history together in college and thinking that they have a lot of conflict with their writing and stuff like that. I loved all the talk about the writing, and yeah, just in general, I love this book. I probably will be buying a copy and reading it again very soon, because I just adored it. It was just a really good, solid, contemporary read. And the last book I want to talk about is King and the Dragonflies by Kacen Callender. And I've been hearing about books by Kacen Callender. They have a couple middle grade novels. Hurricane Child was the earlier one, and then a couple more newer releases that are YA. And so I had heard about them, and now that I have read this book, I want to go and read like everything else that Kacen Callender has wrote, because I just absolutely adore this book. This is a middle grade book, and it's a middle grade contemporary, and usually middle grade contemporary isn't my thing, but it's like when I find a middle grade contemporary I love it. And this is one that I would highly recommend. I just thought it was amazing, and yeah, just brought up a lot of feelings in me. So this is about a boy named King. He's 12 years old, and his brother, who was I think like 16, 17, something around there, dies unexpectedly, like very suddenly dies, and he's dealing with that grief. And King is kind of working through this by he thinks that his brother has turned into a dragonfly, so he goes to the bayou, like this takes place in Louisiana, and he kind of goes to the bayou to like see his brother and try to find his brother in dragonfly form like every day after school. And I think that's like his way of kind of still connecting to his brother and trying to still like have conversations with him and things like that. And then there's also just a lot of stuff happening with him at school. So he had this friend Sandy, who he was friends with before his brother died, but then right before his brother died, his brother basically said that he didn't want King being friends with Sandy anymore, because he overheard Sandy telling him he was gay. And so his brother said, you shouldn't be friends with them because everybody else will think you're gay too. And so now he's dealing with that struggle of like, should I still be friends with Sandy because my brother wouldn't approve of it, and he wants to like have his brother's approval. He's also dealing with his own identity and feelings, and wondering if his brother didn't approve of Sandy, would he not approve of any feelings he's having. And it just, I don't know, it was just such a touching book, and had so many like heartbreaking and then hopeful moments. It deals a lot with grief. It deals with a lot with family. We see how his parents are also dealing with the death and and just like there's also racial things happening, because Sandy and his family are white and King and his family are black, so there's some racial tensions happening in the town and between those families. And as a parent, like, I was just feeling so much for King. I don't want to spoil anything, but there are some like things that like King trying to figure out if his brother would have bad feelings towards him, whether his parents are going to hate him when they find out some of his thoughts and feelings. And just as a parent, like, that feeling of like, I never want my child to think that I won't love them or care for them no matter what their identity is. And just like, I had so much like compassion for King and his like feelings of shame about his own identity and working through that and everything. And I don't know, I just think that you should read this book. If you're gonna read one middle grade contemporary this year, this should be it. It's amazing. It deals with a lot of issues, and I just think it's so good. I would highly recommend all of these books. I gave them all 4 and 5 stars, and I loved them all. There's a wide range of genres, so hopefully you will find one that you enjoy in here. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye.